Folks, things are picking up fast with the Minnesota Wild, and we know that this team is ready to make a whole bunch of moves here in this offseason with what we saw, not just Quinn Hughes, not just Brock Faber, but a whole lot of the people on this team say after Game 5 that this is not what they expected. They want more. And Quinn Hughes' comment really, I think, sparked this entire conversation about how things are going in the direction for the Minnesota Wild. That's what I want to talk about here in this live stream today. Going to be turning this into a video afterwards, and of course, it's all going to kind of do what YouTube does by itself. But now that we have about 24 to 48 hours, oh, it's not 48 hours, 24 hours, maybe 48 hours by the time you're watching this, after the Wild's loss, had some time to think, had some time to really just consider what the changes need to be, what changes need to be made, what moves they likely will make. And I think the biggest thing starts off with a centerman. I mean, that is no doubt. And, when we look at how this team played out throughout this playoffs in specific, mainly this Avalanche series, the loss of Eriksson Ek was detrimental. It was. There was no other way of putting it. That was the biggest loss that the Wild could have possibly had. His faceoffs were missed. His net front presence was missed. His ability to just put a shot on net wherever he is missed out. Having Jonas Brodin, this would have been an entirely different series because you would have the regular crowd around him. His regular first line. You have your second line of, the second line with Eriksson Ek of Johansson and Boldy, but you would have had Kaprizov, Hartman, Zuccarello still. Then you would have had McCarron, then Yurov. The team had a very good structure leading up to those injuries, and we saw what it did afterwards to this team. And, we really just don't want to be able to see that. We don't want to have to see that again. And the way that that is fixed is immediately finding a center to play on, the first line, really. Even though I think Eriksson Ek can play there, you want someone who can pair alongside Kaprizov, and you have dual scoring threats. Something like that would really just be kind of the key to success for this Wild team. And, that's a big point of conversation. The biggest, I would say, up until about July 1st, when Quinn Hughes is on the final year of his deal. And I mean, yes, he has that 1 year left. Still having this year, I think a lot of people are really forgetting about that for this entire, kind of Wild season so far. But when you consider what he can bring, what he can provide, and what you guys are saying in Jack Hughes, it just makes the most sense for the Wild. I think there's a few options. Jack Hughes is obviously one. Austin Matthews, I think, is one. But it's someone along the lines of that you need to be able to make, that number one center for this team. It needs someone who can draw some sort of spark. And, like you say, Airstar, you were here during the watch along. You know exactly what we were witnessing without him in the lineup. Or with him in the lineup, excuse me. But with him, out of the lineup afterwards just watching. There was no spark. Brodin's defense is massive. Eriksson Ek offense, even though he's, really a good two-way center, a good on the faceoffs, is massive. You need to be able to have at least some sort of replacement for those guys. And, you see, valuable Brodin, you need to have at least someone who can jump in instead of Brodin if he's going to be so injured like he was this season, like he was last season. I 100% agree with that. That's another major point because, behind Quinn Hughes, there's not a lot of depth when it comes to that side, and especially on that left side. Hughes, Middleton, who stunk up a storm in the playoffs, and Damon Hunt on the third line with, of course, Jeff Petrie being on the right side instead of Bogosian in that game. But there needs to be someone, and the Wild do have a lot of that inside this organization. I mean, you look at the left side here when it comes down to the defensemen, Viking, Gustafsson, Nyberg, Carson Lambos, David Spacek can play on the left and the right. They have a lot of options. Jack Pert is another one. There's a lot of young, talented defensemen here in this organization that have yet to really have a look at the NHL. And only a few games for Spacek, a few games for Lambos. What was it, 1 or 2 for Gustafsson, Nyberg at the end of the season? Those guys are, capable of getting into this lineup. They really are. Will they have the experience of a guy like Jonas Brodin, like Jared Spurgeon? No. They won't. That's very, very hard to do, especially now when, you don't really have that anymore of all of these guys jumping into one lineup, for their entire career. You have a lot of guys bouncing around, but Brodin and Spurgeon been here for a long time. That's not going to be a replacement that you can just make. And I think that also comes for a lot of the older forwards on this team. What's going to happen with Zuccarello? What's going to happen with Marcus Johansson? What's going to happen with, Vladimir Tarasenko? Will he resign? Will Nico Sturm, play an impact next year? Although he is only 31, he's won 2 Stanley Cups. His experience is valuable with this team. So, there's a lot of questions that will be asked for this entire offseason. And I'm not going to answer them right now, but we will certainly have answers and try to find answers here throughout the entire, season. I just want to kind of do this at the end of the season. Of course, we still have to wait for the players to really speak out when they were cleaning out the lockers, the staff speaking out. That is still all yet to come. So we still have a lot of news, relating to this season. But right now, if I'm Bill Guerin, I'm already looking ahead to, Quinn Hughes. That's one thing for sure. And still has to be July 1st before he can sign, which is still a month and a half away. There's still lots and lots of time. Hopefully a lot of time to, encourage Jack to come over to the Minnesota Wild as well. But Quinn Hughes said this at the end of the game. He said, "This one stings. Love the guys. Love the coaching staff. Love the whole organization." Yeah, this one really stings. I just felt like we had a really good team. You get through these guys, you never know. But if we had to lose, you would want to lose to these guys. They're the best. President's Trophy. So yeah, it stings right now. But just because I feel like we have a really great team. And the way that Quinn Hughes, has played, it's no surprise to anybody that he is going to be someone that wherever he ends up, wherever in his NHL career, will be a superstar. And the Wild need that. They need that. Looking at the box scores over the past series where Quinn Hughes and Brock Faber played 10 to 15 minutes more than everybody else on the defense, you can't afford to lose that. And I think that, the Wild are pretty lucky that Quinn Hughes is a very big fan of Bill Guerin, John Hynes, Brock Faber, Matt Boldy, the guys that played on Team USA in the Olympics. They got a very tight bond through that, and that will play a big factor. And, I'm sure they've already had some, not conversations about the extension, but they've said, hey, what are your thoughts about it? You can't technically go the John Chaker route of, talking to people before the draft or before they can, contractually obliged to sign another one. So I'm sure Bill Guerin was very careful about that, but I think he has a very good idea of where things are going to go from here. And a lot of open space is still here, and that's going to be a big thing for the offseason. But like you said, Reptile, Quinn Hughes is the first priority. You can't afford to lose him whatsoever. And even when it comes down to the forwards, like you saying, Aristar, Vladimir Tarasenko, Matt Zuccarello, Marcus Johansson, I wouldn't mind if some of them would re-sign, but the certain price that you said, very, very, very big part. I don't want to see that. I didn't like the contract that Zuccarello got originally, let's be honest. Looking at this contract here now, I don't have his actual contract, but the 4.125 for 2 years, I didn't really like that. Looking at it now, wasn't all that bad because he still was a major player, a major factor for this team. But regardless, that's a lot of money to pay someone who is 38 years old. And if they re-sign, still a lot of questions. I think Tarasenko will fetch, probably $2 million somewhere, but Zuccarello, I think if he wants to return, he has not necessarily a blank contract, but, they will sign him to something reasonable, and I think he knows that. Marcus Johansson, I can see him re-signing. If we re-sign 1 year, $800K, I can see him doing it again, and I hope that Zuccarello follows that path just to be able to get as much money as this team possibly can going over the next couple of seasons, because we look at this right here, the cap projections, and I'm sorry, I'm on the old setup here on this one. We'll jump here to get the nice little nature background. The offseason, they're getting $13.5 million. that still has to go to those guys, plus free agency. You then go to 27-28, where you have 48. Let's just call it $50 million for the sake of sounding really good. $50 million to go on Quinn Hughes, a few other names, and free agency. If you can save that money this year in free agency on those veterans, that will help out a lot. You say to them, hey, we'll re-sign you, but we can also trade you if you want. If you want to be traded, we will do that just to get something in return rather than retiring. I think there's a lot of options that this team is going to have because the guys that are, on the older side that are here right now, they have the respect from the Wild. They like the Wild. They enjoy it. I think that's, a big bonus that this team does have on that topic. And Airstar, like you said, the trade offers are a big thing, and that's something I want to talk about here. Let's just do it now. Gustavsson, I trade. I no doubt trade, knowing how big the price can be between, let's call it Edmonton. New Jersey, I don't really know because they have Jacob Markstrom, but if that can be thrown into a Jack Hughes deal, I'm all for it. Ottawa is linked to Stuart Skinner. That's another one. Now, the big thing about Filip Gustavsson is he has a no-move clause. That would need to be waived. Hopefully, he would be willing to, knowing that he will just likely be sitting on the bench a little bit more this season upcoming than this year that we just played out. Middleton is another one I think could go. I really wouldn't mind trading, that exact deal, actually, for Jack. I think that would be something that I think they would probably consider. I mean, you would probably have to pay a little bit more than just whether that's Hunter Haight or Riley Height, depending on that. Middleton, I don't think anybody wants him, honestly, which quite honestly stinks because he played really bad. Will he bounce back next year? Who knows? But, I mean, you look at this and you look at that $4.35 million for 4 years. That needs to go. That needs to go somewhere, whether it's, elsewhere or bought out. I don't know. I don't really like the buyout anymore, simply because of where we were with Parise and Suter for the longest time. But something needs to happen to be able to get rid of those guys and, go about that. Exactly. Gustavsson, for how good he was for a lot of this year, after the Olympics, he took a very, very big decline. And that's not where the Wild want this team to be, let alone their goaltending in specific. And when you have a guy like Jesper Wallstedt, at this point now, what we saw him do in the playoffs, I can see him really going to maybe 55 starts in a season. I know that's a very big jump, but playing as many games, and as many, not just high-stake games, but high-pressure-on-him games in the playoffs, I can really see him going about that with a goalie that, can play 25 games. And whether that could be Samuel Levi or not, could be a question. That's still a very big thing to think about, considering how good he was when it came down to the Olympics. But right now, you have two goalies that are very good starters, and one of them has to go. Kaprizov having $17 million makes you think Quinn might want the same, if not more. That's a big thing to really consider here, because there's a few things that I'm kind of on the board with. I'm on the, kind of the scale side. Let me know what you guys think about this here in the chat. With Kaprizov having $17 million, I think that Quinn knows that he won't be able to get the same. I think he knows that logistically, he will not be able to get $17 million or more as well on this Wild team. Could he elsewhere? Potentially. But thinking about this now, that he can only sign an 8-year extension with Minnesota. Can't sign it anywhere else. So, having that idea of, Quinn 12 plus, I do it because of two big things as well. You can afford to pay him. And like you say, Airstar, asking around that, or doing the McKinnon thing for, adding depth to be able to help his team out, whether or not he does that, I don't think so. Personally, I really don't. But 13 to 15 million, I don't mind it. And here is why. Matt Boldy is signed for 4 more years at $7 million. It's a very good contract. And we know Matt Boldy loves it here. That's a big thing as well. You go to the defensive side of things. Brock Faber, 7 years, 7 more after this for 8.5. That is $15.5 million allocated to 2 superstars total. That is a phenomenal situation the Wild find themselves in. And if they need to, up the offer and make Quinn Hughes another guy that is paid a significant amount of money, they're able to do that because they have not put themselves in a situation where you're dishing out multiple $10 million contracts. They have one. It's Kaprizov. And he, I find it hard to say he's worth that because I don't think anybody other than doctors are probably worth $17 million. But in terms of NHL, all that kind of stuff, the way their money works, he can be. He just needs to shoot. He needs to score more. And scoring 40 goals is great. But he needs to shoot to make it worth it. Plus, if you get rid of Gustavsson, who's translating that contract into a $6.4 million, I believe it is, or whatever, $6.8 million, something along the lines of that. If you trade that, that's even more space. It's very easy to sign Quinn Hughes to $13 to $15 million and make it work for the Wild. It's just they have to have a big sequence of things go right. Yeah, getting rid of a lot of the older guys is going to be a big thing of the coming years. Now, whether that goes from Middleton, who's still only 30, Spurgeon, Brodin, whatever happens with them, Petrie, Bogosian, they're probably gone. I mean, realistically, when you're looking at this specific defense right here, you're left with Quinn Hughes, Brock Faber, and Damon Hunt. That, of course, the scratches we have there, that's, a lot of options that can be done next year. I think a lot of those guys are going to see some NHL time. But on that, and I mean, you're looking at the offense as well. You have Kaprizov. Think about it. He's 29 years old. Kind of crazy to consider. He's 1 year younger than Jacob Middleton. But Matt Zuccarello, Marcus Johansson, let's try and get McCarron back. I love his game on this Wild team in specific. I love his game regardless, but he needs to be a Minnesota Wild. Marcus and Nick Foligno, they're getting older. Tarasenko's 34, A lot of older names on this team may be on the way out, and they have to do the right thing to be able to make it happen. They really do. Shout out to you, James. Thank you all guys for being here as well. I know the not still kind of down a bit on the season that we just got out of, but we got a lot to think about, a lot to talk about, and a lot to really go over the next couple of days. Convinced that we have a true playmaking number one center. Kaprizov's full sniper mentality is unlocked, and he could very easily pace for 50 plus. 100%. The one thing about that first line, I mean, let's consider it. And right here, if you look at this line, Zuccarello is the playmaker here for now. Ryan Hartman does nothing on that line. He doesn't. He does nothing on that line whatsoever. If you get a center who can just the peak number one center, that's ideal. If that can happen, that's ideal. If Matt Zuccarello is right here on the right side, that's another option to get the puck to Kaprizov. But I think Kaprizov, not necessarily playing an Ovechkin role, just sitting in one spot because he's a phenomenal skater. He's very good at carrying the puck. But if he can just get any sort of shot, a slap shot, snap shot, one time, a wrist shot, wrap around, Michigan, I don't care what it is. If he can do anything to just get the puck on net, you do it. He needs to get the puck in that direction. So, however they do that, it really does come down to a big need. A really, really big need. I got you, James. Shout out to you, James, as well. Appreciate all you guys for being here in this stream. As the offseason, I think, is now officially underway for the Wild, but we still have a few weeks before we actually get into the big kind of chunk of the reports, the rumors that, we love covering here on the channel. And, if you're looking at Charlie Coyle, 6x6, that's a guy that, trusts the system that he's in. Columbus, interesting spot. I think they're a playoff team that's coming up. But right now, they're not there yet. The Wild are there. Quinn knows that. I think if he signed to this Wild team, it's a situation where everybody wants to play with Quinn Hughes. everybody wants to play with him. There's nobody that does not want to play with a guy who can skate that good, who has that good of a vision, who has that good playmaking. It just makes your job easier. And the fact that, he has the possibility of staying here long term, it makes sense. It really, really does make sense. And that's the thing about Matthews. For those who, may have not kind of gone a little bit deeper, because I've been in like a whirlwind of this, Matthews, I think there's a pretty good chance of him getting traded. Now, my top target for him is LA. Just seems like that type of guy. Seems like he likes the LA lifestyle, whatever. But if the Leafs have the first overall pick, which they do, Gavin McKenna can be just their future. They can kind of flip things completely 180. Not 360. They can just go 180 and do a bit of a retool. Not kind of blow it up, but a retool. And trading Matthews immediately gets you a lot of value. And that's one thing. Don't know if the Wild can really pay for that. I don't know. I think it depends on the value. It depends on, I think, also if he wants out or the Leafs want out of him. That will also play a factor, because if the Leafs have no leverage, he's going to go cheaper. Yeah, just the way it works. But it's difficult to really say how that is going to go right now. But I think there's a lot of things that I can say about this team is that I want to keep Marcus Johansson. I think he played great at the end of the season. Played very, very good in the playoffs. He was very quick. Really one of the only players that could fly, and I mean fly into the zone, put the puck on net, get a face-off. That's what we needed, and that's what we got out of him. I don't expect him to go out for 20, 30 goals. If he does, that's great. But I just don't want him to have that mindset if he needs to go out and do that. And there's one thing, Matt. I'm not trading Brock Faber. I would fight tooth and nail to make him stay on this team. I really do think that this team has what it takes to be able to trade for some of these guys, but I think it would be a lot more of a prospect-sided thing. You really, already more than you did of getting rid of Boyum, Rossi, Ogren, David Jiricek. That's a lot of your future gone. But if you wanted a guy like Matthews, you have to give up any sort of possibility of the future that this team has. And that's a big, big risk that I don't know if they want to do that. And that's why I think it may be a little bit of free agency type of thing. I don't know. I feel like the trade is still the best option, because at that point you really get anybody. And there's not a whole lot of 1Cs on the market, but I don't know. It got to be something. I would love to have the Folignos back as well. The only thing is, when you're looking at their contracts, Nick as well, mainly because his contract is, at the end of this year, he's a bare minimum, league minimum, I believe. I don't see him really going anything more than $1 million. Marcus has 2 years left at $4 million. I'm okay paying that. He makes a few mistakes, but the impact he has on the team is immense. It's really, really big. So that's one thing that, I don't mind keeping either. So I really like the brothers on this team. They play very, very well together. Yurov, I also think, could very well be a big trade chip. I think the Wild experimented this year, and it was certainly an experiment with him as a centerman because face-offs weren't great, and he's still learning. You don't just become a number one center overnight. I think that's what a lot of people in the Wild organization almost wanted or were hoping for, but that's just not realistic. But if you can trade him because of where he was trying to be a number one center for a number one center, I do it. And there's also, we got to think about this with the Leafs. They really don't have a goalie. They have Joseph Woll. Is he a number one goalie? No, he's not. Gustafsson. Yurov. Anything else that we could throw in? I think there's a few other pieces could work for a Matthews. And we got to remember, I made a few videos about this. Bill Guerin loves Matthews' game. He's been very vocal about that. He's very, very vocal about that. And that's one thing that I think is going to be a big play in this offseason to try and convince him at least, or something along the lines of that. But still, the value is something to think about, and it really depends on how highly the Leafs hold his value at still, even with that number one overall pick. So I don't know. I really, really don't know. I mean, that's a big thing, too. Jack Hughes was at the game with Luke in Minnesota with J.J. McCarthy. Odd group. But I don't mind it. Because if they're in the stands here, if they're in the booth, obviously watching Quinn, why aren't they on the ice? They could be on the ice. They could be playing for the Wild. That's something that I really hope that Quinn is putting that, that kind of that word of mouth in them. So I'm curious about that. But for one of the Crosbys and Malkins you're saying, Matthew, that's an interesting one as well, because we got to keep in mind who's always around this Minnesota team and is the most retired person I've ever seen. Marc-Andre Fleury. I think that if, we saw Kyle Dubas say that they want Malkin back. Even though Malkin's a bit older, he's a big guy. He could be an option. Crosby could be an option. Could be an option for a trade. There's a lot of things, but that still kind of puts us in the area of older number one centers. I think this team wants and are looking for that number one center for 5 to 8 years. So that's where I'm thinking about it. Bill Guerin, too, exactly. Played on Pittsburgh. He's been around, played on Pittsburgh, won a cup, all that kind of stuff on their GM side of things, too. So, that's an interesting thing to think about. And really looking at it, the bigger picture, like a lot of you guys are saying right now here in the chat, there is a whole bunch of actual names that we may not think about every single day that are legit options. So I'm enjoying the idea of a lot of this. And Charlie Stramel. Good pull, Robert. That's a very, good thing to kind of remind me on because I completely forgot about it. He's not. He's not a forbidden subject. He will be on this roster next year. He was going to jump into the playoffs in this season to start, I believe it was. I can't remember exactly where the report it was. I think he was going to join the Wild roster and potentially play for this team against Dallas before breaking his ankle in the semis. That's a big thing to consider as well. He's a very good center. I hope his game does translate. It should. He's a big guy. 6'3", huge body, great shot. It's good. It's really good. And that's a big loss for Colorado as well. Lekin and Malinsky. But, Eriksson Ek and Brodin, considering the depth that the Avalanche have compared to the depth that the Wild had in those positions, definitely stung a bit more for us. David Spacek does need a spot. David Spacek really, really does need a shot. And 4'3" Adam Banak. I love Adam Banak. I think he is absolutely fantastic. And his game is going to need to get a bit stronger when it comes down to, getting to the NHL. He's a small guy, but, he's going to grow. He's still super young. And I do think that, his goal-scoring capabilities really something that are underestimated right now. Really something that are. And Airstar, man, I don't want to say Charlie Stramel's a trade chip, but I know he is. I know you're right, too. But we need to hang on to him. You're absolutely right there. He's so good. I need to, I despise, I hate trading prospects without seeing them play in the NHL. I didn't mind David Jiricek. I thought Jiricek was going to be good. He still very much will be a great defenseman in the NHL. But we didn't really see much with him in the Wild. We didn't really see much. So, I'm okay with that. Bobby Brink, hopefully he, lights up next year, gets good, gets, kind of the confidence that we know he has into this roster and, re-signs as an RFA. That'll be good. I don't know. I think there's a lot of things that could very well be going on. Middleton did make a lot of mistakes. He did. I don't think Viking has really any trade value at this point right now. I don't. He needs to get more NHL or AHL games under his belt before, more North American hockey under his belt to really judge that. But I like him on this roster. I really do. There's a lot of spots that are available for a lot of players on this team already in here. A lot of young players. And I think next year, crazy to say, I think there's going to be a pretty big competition between some veterans and some younger players next year about who starts and who goes. And we're going to be talking a lot about this as, you know, the offseason goes on. But right now, I think we covered a lot of what you're going to see over the coming days, weeks, months throughout the offseason. So I'm going to cut this one a little bit short because, of course, there's a few playoff games I want to get back to here now and just watch. But this is a big conversation. And, folks, I want you guys to keep these questions, keep all these comments in mind, and put them in the comments because, of course, I read the comments in all these videos. I want to be able to get you guys in on the conversation, get your guys' ideas in a lot of videos. And, you know, you're looking at a lot of players, a big what if. Charlie Stramel, Viking, Gustavsson, Nyberg. A lot of guys we haven't seen yet that will be making a big impact here. So I do appreciate all you guys being here. A little short stream. Gonna have a lot of these coming over, the next little while in the offseason. So, I see a lot of questions still coming in. I kind of want to answer these just before you do clue it up here. But I think it's very hard for, Quinn not to live up to his. I mean, he's been doing it his entire career. So, I don't know about that one. But having, I would love to have Quinn Hughes, Carson Lambos, Viking, Gustafsson, Nyberg, David Spacek. We have a good lineup on defense that can be very young, but very good. And, I mean, a lot of bare cupboards, as who said that? Let me go back in the chat. That was a very good analogy. Swerve. Our prospect cupboards are bare, nothing but no-name craft dinner left in them. That's right. I think that we kind of got... You have, like, one premium pack of craft dinner left, and then you got a lot of empty boxes. So, I'm okay with that, because we know it's going to get better, but we need to get deeper on the prospect side of things, because a lot of them very well could be in the NHL roster next year. So, folks, appreciate all you guys for being here. Once again, a lot of these are going to be talked about in videos. I want you guys in the comments below, and if you haven't already, be sure to drop a sub here on the channel. But I also want to read you guys one very quick thing that you've seen in a lot of the videos as of late, and this one is, something that we've spoken about a lot over the past couple of videos, like I mentioned, but it's not necessarily Wild related. I have to get my script up because I have to follow a script. So bear with me for just one moment while I do get this up. But as I'm sure you guys have seen a lot over these past couple of videos, Meta has, done some not so nice things when it comes down to, this stuff that's going on the world nowadays. But Morgan & Morgan, they have a word from them. If you or your child spent years growing up on social media and experienced serious mental health struggles, you should hear this. Recently, a jury ordered Meta and YouTube to pay millions for their role in designing addictive platforms and promoting those. We just know. They knew the risk. They knew that those were prioritizing profits. They were doing everything. They had a historic verdict recently. Underscores the consequences of those decisions. Now Morgan & Morgan is stepping up to hold those platforms accountable for the harm they caused. If you click the link in the description of this that I will post in a moment, and in the chat, you'll be entitled to a potential recovery of over $1,000. Morgan & Morgan's doing a lot of great work here. 30-second to a minute quiz. It's completely free, folks. Be sure to give it a go. But that's all I have here. So I appreciate all you guys for checking this stream out. And, that's all I got. So I'll check you guys out in the next video. See you in the next stream. And, thank you for tuning into this one.